Hello and welcome back to PlayIPredict.com. This week I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Councillor Eddie Hoare for Galway City Central. Eddie as well, you remember from his GAA days of some esteem, Galway GAA, I think all the way through you captained Galway at various levels and also from St Michael's as well. So I'm sure you've heard of him. Firstly, Eddie, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're very busy. We joked off air. I don't know how you've any free time at all, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Very good. So, there's so much I kind of want to go through with you because you do have so many kind of facets to your career and whatnot in your own personal life. But the one thing that I like to know is obviously we came to know you first from your sporting background, and the one thing that I'm always curious about, and I always say the story is kind of set the scene, is my sporting background was kind of started off from my mother dragging me out to the garden and taking some shots back and forth, and that's how I grew all my love of it. Who would be your kind of your early sporting influences, or who influenced your early sporting career?
My early sporting career would have been, I suppose, driven by the community games.
Okay.
I grew up on the suburbs of Galway City in Dangan, just on the N59 on the Clifton Road. Newcastle was our local area from a community games point of view. Our parish, Newcastle, had won the Under-10 Community Games All-Ireland in 1993. And it was a similar time when a lot of young families were growing up in that particular area. It was a new suburb of Galway. My brother captained that Under-10 team, and a number of his friends and brothers, friends of mine, would have been brothers of lads on the team. They won that All-Ireland in 93, and I suppose I was 4 years younger than Sean, 4 years younger, and ultimately the goal and the drive for us at that time was to try and emulate what they had done in 93 in terms of winning an All-Ireland, and that's how small it was. But I suppose even at that age I would have been probably only 6, and it would be my earliest memories of sport. But it just, you could resonate the connection and the drive we had then just to emulate that at such a young age. It was we saw the great experiences that they would have had and they got, and the bond, I suppose, within our community. At the time we had John Ruan, who would have been like, I suppose, the Frank Morris of St Michael's. So John is a man from Menlon, County Galway. He came, and a number of I suppose families of the similar age profile came, and all of a sudden we started to develop a nursery, and you had young brothers coming through, and just a whole network of people, and it really formed that community, that bond. And that really was where I formed my passion for Gaelic games and for football. And while at the time rugby probably wasn't as prevalent, hurling and soccer were there as well, but in our community always football was probably, based on the community games, was probably our number one sport.
Perfect. And it just came into my head there when I kind of think Dangan straight away. I think of my college days and the marvelous sporting facilities that are down there in Dangan there as well. You see, particularly when you go in during the summer, you kind of see kids and all the locals going in and out for walks and various ball games and stuff. Would that facility been there at the time available to you guys?
Yeah, at the time, that's where we did our training.
Oh, very good.
Bushy Park School or Dangan. So there was no dressing rooms. It was literally go down on a Saturday morning, you got changed in the trees and went changed or whatever, and went out and played on the college facilities. They didn't have the same quantum of pitches that they do now. They had the running track, they had the two main pitches, the hurling and the football pitch. So we always trained. Every Saturday morning was, like I said, a staple. We were training with St Michael's or with Newcastle as it was at the time. But they were the facilities that were on our doorstep. We also had probably the first all-weather facility was that hockey pitch that's now in Dangan. So that was probably the first all-weather facility in Galway City, if not in Connacht. So we're very, very lucky to have that on our doorstep. And it was owned by NUIG. It was on NUIG grounds. But to be fair, they always had a very welcoming approach to us when we were young. And it did stand to us in terms of our development, in terms of building networks of friends. There was hours on end that we spent on that hockey pitch, be it playing soccer or football or hurling, but they were really good facilities. And it again goes back to facilities. We see the great facilities that they have in Dublin. We see now some of the great facilities we have in Connacht. But again, if you have the facilities, the young children will respond. And I can attest to that firsthand from my youth and my sporting activities from a young age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For anybody that's not aware, like the complex down there is absolutely amazing now. And every time I go down, it seems to be extended even more. It's such a a huge array of land, and pretty much every sport seems to be played down there. It was definitely in my college days. I was that lap on the bicycle back and forth to the campus in Newcastle was done quite a lot. So it's amazing facility to have, and you are right. You probably one of the lucky ones in a way, your community, to have that on your doorstep growing up, because it's an area. I haven't lived in it a while myself during the college. It's an area I find kind of difficult to explain to people, because it's such a beautiful area, so quiet and peaceful. There's so many sporting facilities on your background, but simple things. It's almost like it's a dormer area at times. Like I even struggle, like, where do you go to meet someone for a coffee or something like that? It almost seems to be a bit. I know we're going on a mad tangent, but it's just come into my head there as well. It's
located within the city boundary, but it has the beauty of sort of a country setting within the city. And as I said, it's on the suburbs of the city. Back then we would have had, let's say, the Westwood Hotel. We don't have that anymore, and there is probably lack of facilities in our locality now to even, as you said, go for a cup of coffee. The closest would be now the Sliding Rock, which is probably a 10-15 minute walk or 10-minute cycle down the road. But we don't have that, I suppose. Having lost the Westwood Hotel and other key amenities in the area, we don't have that. But what we lose in terms of facilities, we make up for with having a really good community spirit. And now, it was Newcastle back then, and now it's at the greater club in St. Michael's. We've really, really good community spirit and really good community network there that makes up for the lack of some facilities in our area and to be fair, like you have the Glencoe Abbey Hotel, you have Alan Mulholland and the lads in the Sliding Rock are always so welcoming, and it's those facilities that are really important. We're obviously lucky as well to have our own clubhouse built there 10-15 years ago, and there is a nice facility in there for people to meet and gather. But like that, I do appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, no, because it's always, when you speak of like, you're obviously so prevalent in the GAA circles as well, and I'm sure you've witnessed this quite a lot. But I think I'm not sure if it's small mindedness or whatever, but growing up in the country, there's almost like a kind of a city rural kind of divide sometimes in the GAA community. You're like, oh, they don't play foreign sports over there, or we're better because we're out the country and there's nothing but Gaelic or hurling to play. And at times, have you probably witnessed or you've seen both sides of that?
You would have witnessed it and heard it. In fairness, you'd often get slag with regard to a city club, and we can't lose to a city club.
Exactly.
I suppose as some of the clubs within the city, let's say Salthill, St. James's, St. Michael's, as they started in the early noughties up to recently started to win minor titles and started to win under 20 titles, I think the conversation soon changed, and city clubs started to become recognised as really serious contenders and were taken very seriously. And to be fair to the North Board or some of the country clubs, I think it was more of a
can't lose to these
flag rather than actually being serious, because they knew it would actually annoy us, and that's and it did.
Well, you know what to do when you're playing any city clubs in the near future. Hopefully, games are still.
A good story. I remember speaking to a Killearn man. I was doing the accountancy exams at the time, and he said he'll never forget his first time playing in Westside, which was, the pitch in Westside. There's a McDonald's, a Dunn's, there's 4 roads all around it, and he said they lost the game the same evening. It was an under-16 championship, and he said he was in goals and he couldn't process all the traffic around him. He said in Killearn you'd probably have a cow in the next field, and that's the distraction. And I just thought it was quite funny the way we were so used to growing up there and kicking ball there. We never batted an eyelid at it, but it's just interesting from a perspective of someone in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that you're bringing up random stories, it was actually a soccer game I was playing, and it was for Newcastle, so it was the pitches at the bottom of the
they were the
Headford Road, the Headford Road shopping centre there. So for anyone who's not aware, there's kind of a big, well, it's changed now. It used to be a big roundabout and kind of 2 major fork roads, pretty much either side of the pitch. And like back home, when you're clearing the ball and you're doing a defensive move, and you just put your foot through it and horse it, and you don't think any difference because it goes out in the next field, as they say. But I remember it was a kind of a ball. We were under a bit of pressure at the time, and all I needed to do was tip it. But I did the usual, just absolutely cleared, and it went over the wall, out the road, and all the other team were screaming, "What are you doing?" And it's like it was a totally different mindset. I had no concept at all that there's other people around than our city.
People saw the setting in Westside, for instance, there's a McDonald's drive-through, and more often than not, a ball could end up down there. There wasn't nets back then or anything like that. But that's the beauty of the GAA, I suppose. It's the same game regardless of where it's played, but the setting can be always so different.
And definitely some more stories to be said. So you kind of, You said you kind of, with the community games and stuff, you tried a couple of other sports. Gaelic football was probably always your first love then,
Gaelic
was it?
football was always the first. Rahon Newcastle was the hurling club, so you would have
Okay.
known Tony O'Greig and John Hansbury. They would have been prominent players with Galway through Rahon Newcastle. So at an underage level, you would have played with Newcastle United soccer, Rahon Newcastle with the hurling, and then St Michael's with the football. But I suppose as you start to become older and transition to secondary school and education and different things start taking a priority, you obviously need to pick one. And for me, it was Gaelic football. I think that was of the three, it was the one I was best at, the one I was most interested in. And at the time, coming out of, let's say, Bushy Park School, I went to St Mary's, and while my brother and his friends would have gone to St Mary's, it was a big decision, a big reason why I did. Like, you had football again played a big role, because he had Sean O'Dwyer after coming out of the '98 winning side, and he obviously had a big influence on football in the city and the county. And he had Liam Salmon, who was in there as well, who was a household name in Galway football. So again, while obviously the academics is really, really important, but at that age, the football and the sporting element of St Mary's College played a big part in terms of my selection for secondary education. And it's a decision I'll always be delighted I made, because we had really, really good memories. And again, off the pitch, but mostly on the pitch in St Mary's, and friends that you'll have for life. We obviously got a really good education in St Mary's, but there wasn't a day we probably weren't out kicking a football with Liam Salmon, and test signs were on us. St Jarlath's were obviously the standard bearers in football in Connacht in the 90s and noughties, but we again changed that and won 3 senior A Connacht titles, which was a really, really big feat for us in the city, and again gave us a big basis going forward into adult football. And was, for, I suppose, Liam Salmon is the man. We'd be always grateful for that. The time, effort and energy that he put in and is still putting in is really great to see. And it's people like Liam, and like I said, the likes of John Wan, we had John Kenny in our club as well, that I suppose created that culture. But Liam, I sometimes speak to him. I spoke to him recently enough, and he said while he put in the time, that what he's got out of it in terms of the relationships he's built up, he can't go down Chop Street without probably meeting someone that he has coached. And some of just the small stories, like I remember Liam said before that there was soccer at the time and Gaelic, and we were in a All-Ireland semi-final, the Hogan Cup semi-final, and there was a soccer semi-final on, I think, as well, or a soccer Connacht final. And Liam said, I won one of those with the team that lost a Connacht final from the football. We had won one of those handiest, the Hogan Cup, so that was his out of Connacht. But I thought it was very funny. He took his football team playing soccer and they won an All-Ireland, but he always had that passion, that grow for it. And still to this day, I know I met Alan Holland recently, and he said he lives very close to Liam, and he'd often pass the drive, and he said, Liam, I'm going down coaching the 14s. Liam would hop in the passenger seat and train them. He would, and happy to do it, and still has that influence and that sort of father figure sort of Galway football feel to me, definitely, and my other fellow teammates in St Mary's.
Yeah, no, well, I can't, it'd be remiss of me not to spend a couple of minutes talking about Liam Salmon. Like, he's remarkable. I know from various kind of underage schools of excellence and stuff like that. The man's passion for football is just something that I've never actually seen before. And while I think the modern day Gaelic football, particularly at intercounty level, has kind of refined itself into more of an industrial kind of machine, kind of grind out results and stuff like that, his passion for the love of the skills and the love of playing football in the right way, and the level of coaching that he puts on the training pitch is just remarkable. And he just you just go into a training session with him or a coaching session with him, and he would just be that breath of fresh air. And it's just amazing how he keeps it going the whole time, because it'd be very easy to put the feet up a bit, wouldn't it?
Probably one of the first coaches to start to integrate in ladders and the agility and the bollards and different facets. And it was all with the ball. It was you'd be always tired after a session or a training session with Liam Salmon, but you'd be guaranteed you'll be having your shooting at the end, or you're going for goals. And I suppose being a forward or a forward myself, or forward way inclined, Liam being a forward as well, he always liked that attacking flair, that attacking style, and it was always a kick pass, and that was just his philosophy. And you could see it all over the teams that we played with in St Mary's, and even when I transitioned to the senior, I was probably lucky in a way that Liam got the opportunity to manage us in 2008. But again, he brought through a lot of the guys that he would have worked with, and you could see again Liam's, I suppose, personality on that Galway team in 08. We won a Connacht title, very unlucky to lose to Kerry, but I remember we bet Tyrone in the league. Just playing football the way it should be played. We outscored Tyrone. We remember that night up in Croke Park in an All-Ireland quarter-final, like, just went at Kerry the way Galway football should go at Kerry. And like, I think Michael Meehan got 10 points the same night, but I'd often hear people going on about
the night from the Massoon, wasn't it?
And it was probably a little bit unlucky that we didn't progress. We won a Connacht final. We got the tough draw in Kerry in the quarter-final because they'd come through the back door, and any other sort of team maybe in a quarter-final we may potentially have progressed. But they're definitely, again, going back to Liam Salmon, and for me, my own football career, I owe him so much in terms of what he done for us in St. Mary's and giving me the opportunity to ultimately put on the maroon jersey at senior level for the first time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think obviously there's other people involved as well, but Liam's work in kind of taking St. Mary's to that next level, kind of tipping away at the threshold that was kind of North Galway football in terms of St. Jarlath's. I know there's borders and stuff like that, but I always think St. Jarlath's kind of led to everybody calls, North Galway the traditional home of Galway football. And like, I remember I growing up, you'd very rarely play a city team. Like towards the end, it became more and more prevalent, but that was kind of on the back of kind of St. Mary's taken to another level. All the various works happened in city clubs as well, and you guys, even you competing in a county final as well, that probably be unheard of at the start of your career and stuff like that. So it was all that work that kind of took football in the city to a whole new level, because I always think it's a little bit more difficult in a city because you straight away you have the choice of this, like the city life going on. There's so many distractions, for want of a better word, and then there's also your possibilities or your options in terms of different sports as well, or is there on your doorstep. Whereas when you're back out the country, it's kind of, you're probably, unless you're a dual club, it's one Gaelic sport, either Gaelic football or hurling. You might have a soccer team intermittently, but by and large, your first love is Gaelic games. So I think it's the work that happened, kind of, I think you can kind of see the spike then really in terms of Mary's doing well and then the city clubs competing, and now where football is very strong again in the city. It's probably a lot down to that work, and obviously there's a huge amount of work done in the various clubs as well. But you can kind of mirror the two of them together almost in a way.
Yeah, and like you said, there is the distractions. Like if Connacht rugby have become very big in recent years, and like when I was growing up, rugby wasn't as, I suppose, prevalent in the city. While it was obviously being played, it wasn't as big an attraction for us as young lads growing up. Whereas now, if we were of the similar age profile, you probably would definitely try it, whether you liked it or not. You'd probably try it, definitely with the build of Gaelic footballers now or whatever, they'd probably be quite similar. But that's in the city, and it's owing to the guys that have put in that effort, that hard graft, that effort. I remember like lads like Sean Armstrong, Saul Till, Peter Kern here in our own club, Pat Regan, different lads that just gave their hours. Seamus Burke in St. James's, and they're all lads that just, I suppose, a lot of them came from country backgrounds, and they just came into the city in the early 90s, late 80s, and they brought with them that sort of passion, that grow for GAA, and it was all over the St. Michael's, the Salt Hills, the St. James's. Because if you look at St. James's, Seamus Burke won county titles with Killearn, and he was front and centre of a lot of the work that was done in St. James's. You have Mike O'Neill from Tune Stars, who came in and sadly passed since. And again in Salt Hill, a lot of guys like came to Salt Hill from rural locations and brought with them that love of GAA. Liam Salmon, obviously, and Tony Regan had probably brought that element to Salt Hill earlier than St. Michael's and St. James's. But it's great to see that it has transitioned through. And I can see, even I go back to John Rowan, coming from Menlaw, born and bred, real football country, and he brought that to St. Michael's. And when he came to the city, it was never going to be anything but Gaelic football that he was going to be involved in. It wasn't soccer, because it probably wasn't played as much in the more rural settings of North Galway. I see myself, even my own dad, Mount Bellew, again, football country, and he'd always recite some of, while he didn't play too much, he always recited the great memories of Mount Bellew, and it was always Gaelic football and Johnny Hughes and different guys, the 1960 teams he'd always refer to. And that's infectious in terms of an environment, and it feeds off, young players feed off that, and ultimately, luckily, our community fed off it and really formed our community. You can see now, even some lads are getting older, they're getting married, and the most part of the crowd is St. Michael's, are related to sport, and it just shows what sport can do. It's not just winning games or winning medals, it's the relationships and the bonds that are there for life. And I suppose to St. Michael's, to St. Mary's and NUIG, I owe really a lot, because football has given me a great platform in terms of my working life and in terms of politics. It's given me a great outlook on life, and it's allowed me to take traits from that to use in life, in work, in business on a day-to-day basis, and indeed in politics. And very similar correlations overlap in terms of the meeting people and things like that. In work, I meet people all the time. I meet people in politics all the time. But football is about people. It's about communities, and they're the traits that I inherited through Gaelic games, and for that I'd be grateful, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was actually Jose Mourinho that described it. I think he was talking about United at the time, trying to rebuild the squad, but I think he quoted football heritage and football culture. But you very much see that now in the, again, you described it, I hate the word, but the city clubs now as well, where they have communities of their own in a big city environment. There is, you touched on it there with the weddings and stuff like that. It's no doubt helped the clubs progress so much more, that you do have these communities, you do have these kind of networks of people with contacts, and the community spirit we've seen so many times as well. That probably helped you as well, then kind of your kind of club career progressing, and then into underage Galway systems as well. It probably would have been more difficult hadn't had that basis, or kind of all that groundwork not been built up. You're now kind of, I suppose it's more prevalent that kind of players in the city might be taking that next step, where it's not just kind of regionalised as it might have been a little time before that.
Yeah, and again, let's go back, and I suppose I forgot to mention, in our time, I was born in 1987, and I was coming into my teens in the late 90s and early 90s, and obviously that 98 Galway team was a big influence, and we all remember the great memories of 98. 2000 wasn't so good, but a really good journey, and 2001. So all we wanted to do was to
copy those,
wear that jersey and to copy them, and they were real role models for us, and that again fed into the ethos in the city, and definitely played a big role. Like I said, it dictated probably me in terms of where I went to secondary school, but that 98 influence. But going back to the culture within the city, yeah, it definitely did change. And when teams start to win things, you start being taken more seriously, and people have more skin in the game in terms of they know what's there, the potential that's there. And you could see then, like in the early noughties, the Pearse Stadium was being developed, and again, it's very similar guys that went about fundraising because they could see the potential in the city. They could see the, I suppose, social dividend from GAA in terms of what it done for communities and building them up. So Pearse Stadium was developed, and all of a sudden you had some state-of-the-art facilities. You had your Loch Georges, we had the Dangan. We in St. Michael's built a new clubhouse. You had the Hoare, and all of a sudden you started to see facilities started to improve, and people started to invest in the games and invest time, money and energy, because ultimately their kids are playing. They could see, as I said, the social dividend that was there. And that's why I suppose in politics I see how important and how important Gaelic games was, and sport for me as a young person in terms of making the right choices. And that's why I'd always promote investment in sport, investment in these facilities, because if young players are playing sports, you're hanging with the right people, you're doing the right things, you're training, you're just learning, as I said, some of the life traits that you'll use going forward. And that's why a big part of my campaign last May when going for the local elections was investment in sporting and recreational facilities, because I know firsthand
the importance of it all,
the important role they play, you know.
Yeah, and actually I found it remarkable as well. I believe my dates are wrong. I think it was 14 you were in the county final, is that correct?
2014, yeah.
And is it right about the story that it seems like a long time ago? Is it right at the time that you didn't really have a proper training facility or a club facility of your own? That story seems remarkable.
Yeah, that again, it was a story that picked up a lot of attention at the time. We were training on not even an all-weather pitch at the back of the old hockey pitch, or the hockey pitch in Dangan, on a sand track. Basically, we were training on for the winter, using light from the hockey pitch that wouldn't have, was spreading onto that particular surface. So I remember us training. John Kenny was over us at the time, and it was all training. We were running up different hills and doing different paths and that around the Dangan, really on public grounds. Really, our pitch at the time, you would know, as we said before, was in Westside, and a big development on the old on Seamus Quirk Road basically widened the road, put in a bus lane, but took out a large portion of our pitch, which is on public lands. So unfortunately, we were left without a pitch for 5 to 6 years while the development progressed. And during that time, we ultimately did get to a county final and didn't have a home at the time, which was ironic. But now we have, since, a state-of-the-art facility in the Westside playing complexes. The agreement was that while it would be given up, that they would redevelop, and they have done, to be fair. And it's a really, really good facility, and our new home in the same location, but our new home.
It's a remarkable story, and I don't want to go jump to conclusions too much, but it almost seemed, had there not been that so much good work that we've discussed the last 10 or 15 minutes or so of kind of implementing the culture and everything else in the club, that many people would have gone, we don't even have a pitch train to help this, I'm going off playing something else. Or there was very much a group spirit. Was everything about the GAA community and the team spirit and all that was it was there, and you kind of made use of it. Then it doesn't matter where we're going to train, we're going to train.
Yeah, the GAA, one of the big things about it is connections and people, like I mentioned earlier. And to be fair, we've good people in our club, and we had a good executive at the time, a strong executive, and they formed the links. And to be fair, the college complex in NUIG, we had Salt Hill, we trained in the Prairie at times, used their facilities for some games, Father Griffin's, Air Oak and Crestwood. So all the other city clubs chipped in. There was times we trained in Renmore and St Mary's College. So again, they all chipped in, like, I suppose, at our time in need, and to be fair to them, and gave us that opportunity while we trained mostly on gravel patches in Dangan. When we needed games for, let's say, a home league game, we'd have to give up home advantage if the likes of, let's say, Salton, Nakara or St James's or Air Oak didn't give us a pitch, and more often than not they did. So again, it's, while we're competing, it's all one, I suppose, football family in the city in a way.
Yeah, no, and it's great, and we've even seen it recently in the horrible, difficult times as well. The GAA community being, at the power front, at the front of, whether that's donating facilities, Crow Park being used as a testing centre, and the various other facilities across the country. Really, we've seen some great work. Kind of the real community, everything that should be right about the GAA and the community spirit and helping out at a time of need. We've thankfully been able to witness a lot. You never like to see it in this situation, but there's always a bit of good to come out of a darkness situation.
To be fair, and so many other organisations could learn a lot from the GAA, and we probably witnessed it firsthand in recent months with the COVID-19, and working in as a councillor. There was a community response forum set up, and the first port of call was the GAA clubs, because they obviously, while it's just what they do, but they have such a bank of community activists that are willing to voluntarily give their time. And that's what Galway City Council did. They contacted the GAA clubs around the city for their community response. So here in St Michael's, for instance, we had 40 people in a WhatsApp group. So if anyone within the radius of the, I suppose, GAA boundaries of St Michael's needed shop and collected, needed something that was Kikunan, the message went in, and it was tasked within seconds, mostly by different guys. So there was probably 15, 20 different occasions where a message went in, and again it was the GAA, and that's what the GAA does. And that's why I'd have reservations with regard to the GAA ever going professional, because what about the guy that lines the pitch, the guy that washes the jerseys? Or it's the voluntary, I suppose, element of it that really is unique in the GAA. And while obviously we want to see the games progressing, and obviously they are becoming more commercial, but I'd still have massive reservations with regard to losing that voluntary element, because the grassroots members, in my opinion, are the ones that keep the GAA going. And like I said, in the COVID-19, in our darkest hour, in terms of community-wise, it was the GAA who stood up and put their hand up, and that should be remembered.
Yeah, no, and just to slightly touch.
And obviously other clubs as well. There was obviously your other sporting bodies, but it was that sort of community element within communities that definitely played a big role.
Yeah, and if there's any positives to be taken out of this kind of horrible situation, it's that we've seen people come together. And it was actually interesting as well. I think the GAA kind of circuit has been out of reality, really. I think the intercounty scene for the last couple of years has kind of grown and grown and grown, and it's understandable so. And we almost have that split between intercounty and club scene. You probably witnessed it yourself as well towards the end of when you were back to the club scene after your Galway career. But there's so many intercounty current intercounty players, and they're kind of like they always are thinking as the next county training, whatever gym session, stuff like that. And sometimes the club scene became a chore for them. And I spoke to a couple of with the charity event over the weekend, and I got to speak to Pádraig Manny and Jason Flynn, and I was a little bit taken back. And both of them said to me they've never enjoyed their hurling so much. They've been just back with the club. They've been back on the side of the pitch, changing in the car, no showers, no dressing rooms, no fancy facilities, just in and out, just playing hurling for the love of it. And they've both kind of got that stripped down element where they've both said they've never enjoyed it as much. So it's kind of refreshing in a way. Sometimes I think the whole lockdown period has kind of by default, and we didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. We've kind of had to reprioritize what's important in our life and things that we thought were important. The whole rat race, I think, is the best description of it, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I've seen it myself through lockdown. You're always like chasing and running, racing, doing this, that, and very rarely have time for this, for that. But the lockdown, literally, everyone down tools, and nothing was open, there was nothing on, and it sort of gave a lot of people perspective. And you'd always hear about the big corporations and the directors and things like that. And I spoke to a lot of people who were big jobs in Galway, and a lot of them said like that it gave them good opportunity to spend good quality family time that they normally would only probably get at 2 weeks during the summer, or maybe a week at Christmas. And even then they'd be coming racing and running and racing. So it gave people a different outlook in terms of of life in general. But going back to the football as well, I think there's a lot of positives that can be taken out of COVID with regard to the whole club scene. And I probably started senior intercounty in 2008, and was probably there up to 16 with Kevin Walsh, and I could see the incline in terms of the eliteness. And while it's not professional, it's pretty
almost,
much
isn't it?
Semi-pro, and it was probably Armagh were the first team that brought that professionalism to it, that they really like trained, I'd say, throughout the calendar year. And it's just slowly built up. And now you obviously Dublin, and a lot of their players are probably full-time. They don't have jobs, and what they do is GAA. And it's brought that eliteness. But taking the shackles off and the COVID-19 coming in is probably, it's been refreshing in a way for a lot of the club guys, because they don't have that pressure of intercounty. They know now they're intercounty, they can enjoy their clubs. Whereas, as you said before, it's nearly like a chore. When they come back, they're out. Sometimes they might be carrying an injury right through their intercounty. They won't enjoy their club. Whereas now I think a lot of the intercounty players are actually enjoying it. And hopefully maybe when there is Central Council are meeting again, it could be something that they could look at in terms of maybe allocating different sections of the calendar to clubs, and let them go play, enjoy it, and have your intercounty players. Because at the moment, a lot of intercounty players never stop. They're playing in January, and they might get a few weeks off in December, and they're back playing their FBDs, their leagues. They might go for a week or two with their clubs back for intercounty right until they get knocked out of the championship. And I saw it firsthand myself, and often was the case whereby you'd go back to your club and you were so drained and you couldn't enjoy it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's
it's almost just stuck in a rest period, a rest county period for you. But I think we'll probably something we talk about another day. But I think it'd be I have to just touch on as well the club, the interest in the club scene as well. We've seen so many streaming services available in many different county boards as well. I know Paul Bellew and the Galway County Board has done Trojan work as well, getting that on board, and it's been great for me personally as well, being away, being able to watch club games again online. There's a huge market there. It's definitely something that GAA I think have to balance, or can see there's a huge audience here for, whether that's reducing the intercounty scene, or as you said, making kind of strict allocated windows for the club scene to be enjoyed properly, not just kind of shoved in the way and we'll stick it here because there's no gap.
I suppose, like, with the disappointment of the numbers and the crowd restrictions being 200, obviously you have only probably 30 tickets for each club in terms of fan base. And to be fair to the county board, they've showed initiative and engaged and partnered up with Nematon to provide the streaming service. And it's a really, really good service, and something that could be potentially used going forward. Because, like you say, I've so many mates in Australia, in America, that are refreshing their Twitter feed as a game goes on, but they'd love to be able to watch the game. So it might be, again, something good that has come out of this pandemic, and an opportunity for the county board to maybe look at that again next year. And while it just opens up the audience, and anyone that puts on a club jersey, they always refer back to, and we saw the impact that What's the Score and Paul Flaherty's app has had in terms of reaching a worldwide audience. But the likes of that partnership with Nemiton is definitely something that I think potentially they could even do. It just opens it up to a lot more people, and I think there'll be great interest, and hopefully it's there is the subscription in the coming weeks, and maybe next year they can revise the service level agreement and see about opening it up to even a bigger audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we had Paul on here a couple of weeks ago as well. It's a remarkable, achievement getting that up on board, and the interest he was telling me there has gone through the roof. He's almost taken back with some of the demand in it. So there is a huge interest in the club scene, and as you said, kind of the voluntary nature of the community aspect of the clubs is there, and everybody wants to get on. So it's something that the GAA will definitely have to, I suppose, look at a bit further. Look, we've been forced into it by this year, but let's hope that it can be kind of rejigged in the right manner.
Sometimes when you are forced into a corner, backed into a corner, you have no option but to become innovative and to come up with new ways and some of them may become the new norm. And to be fair to Paul Bellew and the guys in the county board, it has worked very well. I understand it's generating a nice revenue stream for the county board, which is important in these tough times, because all organisations, and especially voluntary organisations, are under pressure. But most importantly, it's opening up our games to more people, and the more people that can watch and the more promotion of our games, it's good for everyone. So again, it's definitely a positive step forward, and I must say well done to the guys for their initiative in that.
Absolutely. Before we move on from the 40 county final, I have to just mention this to you. You went viral, I think it was maybe the next day in Canavans afterwards. Where did that Micheál McCarthy impressions come from? It was just, you're right on the money, I have to say. Is that something that needs to be lubricated with a couple of beverages, or is that a talent that's always there?
I can throw it out a lot of the time. I won't now, in fairness. No, I suppose I picked up that in the back garden, because we were commentating different games and down the back garden, and you were winning a lot of All-Irelands at different times, kicking against the shed. And my father will attest to, we had a garage door, I remember, an electric garage door, and it must have been replaced a lot of times. But it was Micheál McCarthy that commentated on all those games, but that's where I picked it up. And obviously the tradition is win, lose or draw. The losing team generally goes out to the winning team the day after the county final. It's probably a novel thing for us. We hadn't been in a county final before, and we met on the Monday, as you do, and we went out to Canavans, and a really, really great relationship. A great evening that we'll remember. Probably remember it a lot better, more fondly than the day before. And I often say to people when they said, geez, you done well out in Canavans, I said, it's a pity I didn't perform as well in Tuam the day before. But look, for us, a small club in St. Michael's, 500-600 members, and that's definitely the county final in 2014. Will win, lose or draw. And fine, we were beaten heavily on the day, but the journey right from, as I said, from community games right the way up to in 2004 with Peter Kern, we won a minor in 04. That we won a minor in 01, a minor in 04, progressed all the way through under 21 into intermediate, got to an intermediate All-Ireland final. And I suppose the ultimate was to progress to senior, and to have an opportunity to lead out my club in a county final is something I'll always remember, regardless of the result. And it's something that we'll always look back on fondly, like I said. And again, we've some good minor teams, some good young lads coming through, and hopefully, you never know, we could be welcoming another club to the Sliding Rock.
Yeah, as I say, get Alamont Holland there to open out Knockawall or something. But you are right, though. It's I think we get so caught up in the winning and losing, and winning being the most important thing. And don't get me wrong, everybody wants to win. It's the pinnacle of your career. You're not in sport if you don't want to win. But there's so much more benefits in the journey. the experience learned. You're creating, I suppose, would not be disrespectful. The club really didn't have a lot of history. It didn't have a lot of people to look forward to. Now people coming through the underage setups see the likes of you guys making the 14th final. Why can't we go one step more? You're giving examples. There's always kind of the path of the road has to be churned out a bit before you go all the way there at times, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this year, last year I worked with the under 14s in the Féile, and I'm working with the under 16s. And I refer back to actually only most recently Jara Silk's interview, and like Jara spoke so well in terms of what he said, and he said it's never about winning at underage, and it never was in Corofin. It was about progressing the skills, the left foot, the right foot, and building the personal traits, the personal qualities to become a player that fits into the senior setup. I thought that would really depict everything about Corofin, about their philosophy, the whole mantra. And that's something I'm trying to instill in some of the teams that I'm coaching. More so at underage, we were very competitive. And obviously when you get to 16, 14, 16, I said to the guys, you're now gone from primary school to secondary school. You're actually in school with other club mates of different clubs. And it does become more competitive. But with the difficulties today for young guys and the exposure in terms of online and social media and all the distractions that go with it, like you could get bogged down in the nitty gritty of the result. But it's about getting involved, progressing on your skills, and ultimately becoming a better person and building those personal qualities, that personal traits. I just thought I was very impressed with the interview from Dara, because he really depicted quite vividly and accurately exactly what I've been trying to channel to the guys that I'm coaching at the moment in the under 16s, because we're not going to win everything. You can't control the result. What you can do is try and influence the controllables, like the work rate. So that's all built on your attitude, your personal traits in terms of working hard. We can't all kick on our left and right foot equally, but we can all run as fast and as quick as we can and apply ourselves equally. We can all stand up and say we're not going to run and have them bad qualities. So it's about building them good habits, them personal traits. And it's something that I'd be instilling into the young guys here in St. Michael's, is the personal qualities, personal traits, working on the skills, what will make you more difficult to mark when you're older. And it's them sort of things that give you the advantage. And as I said, form better people, better men going forward. And that's for your girls and for your ladies as well. And that's the qualities that they need to possess, them personal characteristics that they'll bring with them, not just for sport, but in business, in life, and down the line.
Absolutely. I think I saw a quote, I think it was in relation to Scott Parker gave a brilliant interview after the playoff victory, and he spoke about the club being kind of a bit weak, and the guys, had great talent, but they didn't have great character, they didn't have great togetherness, and that was what he was most proud of, was getting all that together, getting that character, the belief into the squad, and here they are back in the Holy Grail of the Premier League. Just on Corofin as well, they almost kind of annoy you at the same time. I don't think you can find any fault in them. They're the best footballers by a country mile in the country, forgive the pun, but they're also some of the best characters, the best people you can meet. Like, you cannot say a bad word. Often, sometimes you can get some winners that are kind of cocky and arrogant, but they couldn't be further from the truth. And you wouldn't even blame, given the level of success that they've had over the years, for them to be a bit of an edge to them. But there's no airs and graces at all. It's just remarkable in a way. They're bang on the money with every aspect, aren't they?
No, they are, and like that, I was probably lucky to play with a lot of them, like the Gary Syces, the Kieran Fitzgeralds, and the personal traits again is front and center of what they do, and they really apply themselves, and they are such a good example to the younger guys coming through. You see Kieran McGrath, Michael Comer, and it's just literally it churns its way through so naturally to the senior grade. I remember Paddy O'Shea famously said there's only one thing worse than a bad loser, and that's a bad winner. And I think it's an important one, because you can see with Corofin, even Gareth Silk, he was interviewed, and I go back to it. They said, you're going for 8 in a row, but he said, we're not, because it's not the same 15 guys that have won. We're going for our first with this group of players. And I thought it was very well put. Again, a very well put. And that's the sort of mentality, the attitude that's instilled to them. And ultimately, it's infectious. You can see it. Any young lads coming through, they bring 2-3 lads through every year, and it's the same. And again, it's really all about the team, the way they play, the way they apply themselves. And as you said, really good characters off the pitch. Kieran Fitzgerald devoted everything to the GAA, Kieran, a real gentleman. He's given how many years? Some 2098, I'd say, they had a fail in 95, 96. He retires, and what does he do? He goes
Straight
in
into the club.
a selector, and I'd say maybe his wife Emer will be given out, but that Kieran fits, and that's what he's given. Like, he's straight back in as a selector. Another person will probably take a year off, a bit of time, but no. Kieran is back to the club, and that's what Corofin is about. And I can guarantee Gary Sice will be the same way, that will be coaching before when he finishes his playing. But maybe for us all, they might all take a year out in the next year. And
doesn't look like it anytime soon, I have to say. Yeah, no, they're just remarkable how they keep it going, and it's continuous. And you know, the sort of team that you can go and talk to any kind of person that's involved in GAA, any length and breadth of the country, and they'll both kind of go, oh wow, they're brilliant, they're known all around. I suppose focusing on yourself then as well, you would have captained a lot of you captained Galway teams, you pretty much captained, I think, at pretty much every level. You then kind of, you made the move across to politics. Do you think those kind of skills in terms of your leadership and all the good quality traits that you've described there and what you were trying to pass on to the under 14 and the underage teams, was that always kind of a love of politics always kind of in you? Or because at times, I remember growing up, it'd be very unusual to find someone that was really in politics really interested. I think it's changed a lot the last couple of years, but when I think back to my youth, I don't think I ever had much of an interest in it. That's certainly something I would talk with my circle of friends to. Where did that, obviously you had the leadership qualities, where did that kind of transfer, or where did that first kind of come around?
I suppose my love of politics, my father was very, very much involved in Fine Gael here in the city, and his family would have been as well. My mother as well, while she wouldn't be actively involved in the canvassing of it. Her father was a classmate of Henry Kenny, who was Enda's father in Castlebar.
Very good.
And Henry was a TD, and obviously Enda became a minister. So they had a Fine Gael background from Castlebar. My father was very actively involved in Fine Gael in Galway City. And I suppose when I transitioned into college, into third level education in NUIG, I became involved in maybe the Young Fine Gael Society, and we started to, I suppose, you'd go canvassing. I remember I canvassing with Pádraig McCormack, who was a politician for years. Brian Walsh then took Pádraig McCormack's seat when he retired, and we had Pádraig Keneally, who was the councillor that seat was vacated when I came in last May. But we canvassed for years, and through our canvassing we built up a connection. And while I say I have the St. Michael's connection and a big group of friends, I've also a big group of political friends, and like I said, the likes of Brian Walsh, and we were very, very interested, and probably was unusual in a way to be interested from young people from the city, but we always had a great interest. So the elections were on, we'd always have that on all the time in terms of the debates, the various different counts and things like that. We always just had an interest in it. As it happened, like I said, we canvassed for years with different candidates. It was always suggested that potentially I would run. 5 years ago, it was suggested that Pádraig might step aside. He did another term. It probably would have been too soon for me anyways. And obviously last March, Pádraig contacted me and said his intention was to retire, and the party's intention was for me to run. And I suppose had the first refusal on it, and was delighted to be given the opportunity.
Do you
and
think
as it happened, it really suited me in terms of I had been in employment in a large firm in Galway, and I'd since moved to the family practice, so it gave me that little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to manage both. And I literally had 6 weeks notice to run the election, and it ran really, really well. And again, I devote a lot, and very thankful to again the club people, the people within my community who really came out in their droves to support me. And it's going back again to the family connections, that community that was built up down the years. They had that faith in me, and that ultimately showed in the ballot box, that they did, and that connection was there. And it's very difficult to break that connection. And so ultimately I have the responsibility and to use that faith and channel it in as positive way as possible going forward for the next 4 years.
Absolutely, yeah. It was just before we get kind of into your own personal career, just as a general, I wouldn't know enough about the area, but just have a passing interest in it. To me, it seems like I think the youth in Ireland have become a lot more interested in politics over the last couple of years. I think I think for me, around the times of the repeal the eighth referendum and the marriage referendum as well, where we got to see like people coming home in droves ready to vote and stuff like that. And I think without kind of pigeonhole, I know from my personal point of view, kind of watching some of the Virgin Media News, they have some like Richard Chambers and Gavin Riley and stuff like that. They're younger, kind of, they've developed even the way they covered a lot of their kind of news feeds now goes on social media, and they're very proactive in terms of kind of giving people a new, fresher way to follow politics. It feels like where we might necessarily, I think if you look across the board in the UK, and I think you can see it by the likes of the bread exit referendum, where it was kind of, there was a huge age profile in the final result, and I think it's left a lot. I think it's almost left a split in the country between the youth, and where the youth might necessarily have bothered to vote in a weird way, and then we see the consequences of it. I think we're lucky in the way here that there seems to be a lot, there's a freshness, there seems to be more of a, it is more of a conversation. Maybe it's me getting a little older as well, and I'm more interested in it as well, but it does seem to be a whole freshness there in terms of interest and coverage. Was that something you would have noticed yourself?
Definitely, and I suppose going back to old politics in Ireland, you were probably either supported Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, and there was probably the two, that was the Civil War politics. And now I suppose with the emergence of other parties at the left, and obviously just different political views and things like that, I think has opened up the whole spectrum, and it's a new type of politics, and it's a politics I think that appeals more to young people like myself, that I suppose feel that I have an opportunity, a platform to be able to channel my ideas and not just be confined by party manifestos or party beliefs. And I can see that in my own party in Fine Gael, that they're trying to promote and trying to appeal more to the younger people. And like, for instance, I have a background in finance and accountancy, and they've sort of opened the opportunity. And I remember on the election campaign meeting, the Taoiseach at the time, Leo Varadkar, and he was very open to young, educated guys getting involved in politics. And I think it's very welcome. And equally, as you said, the referendums, the marriage referendum, the repeal, again, it gave, I suppose, young people the opportunity. It showed them how important their vote was, in terms of, like, if you believe in something, if you campaign for it, if you firmly believe, you can make things happen. And you could see with them referendums, it was a transition shift from the old Ireland, in terms of, like, you often see the clip of the contraception on Gay Byrne on the late, like that would have been unheard of, the repeal referendum back then. And it just shows how people have come. And it's the power, really, ultimately. We all have one vote, and I think now young people see how important that vote is and are more willing to use it. And like you said, going back to your Gavin Riley and Richard Chambers.
There are only two, but they just come to mind straight because I'm friendly with them and I would follow them a lot. There's many more as well.
A new dimension to it, and the social media, it's in your face all the time, politics, and it plays a massive role. And we see with Donald Trump, we see with, let's say, Boris Johnson and the Brexit referendum, like, politics have a big bearing on our economy as a whole. And the decision you make at the ballot box, like, you see Brexit, and you see a lot of people said that, you know, if they went again, that they probably would have voted to stay. But people didn't exercise their right to vote. They didn't vote, and ultimately, what was voted through, you saw with Donald Trump in the States, people said no, Donald Trump will not be elected. But again, it's a different political system, but you can see the influence that a political leader can have on the whole world as a whole. In terms of Donald Trump, what he says or tweets or whatever has a big impact on the world, on the economy. And I think young people are becoming more informed, be it through Twitter, through young journalists, or through the media, in terms of how important politics is. And I suppose I'm grateful to have the opportunity to put my stamp on it and try and appeal to a younger audience, and try and translate and push their message at the level with which I am elected.
Would that be something you would kind of, when you decided that you're going to take this opportunity? You know, it came quite late in terms of I suppose the political calendar, in terms of, I think it was a short enough campaign window you had that decision. But is that something that you would have kind of made a conscious effort? Because I can see, like, you're very active on social media, you're very available, you're always sharing content. You're never, I mean this as a compliment, you're always willing to give your opinion and give updates and stuff like that. that across your social media. Is that something you would have made a conscious effort to when you decided to give this a lash, pretty much?
Yeah, I suppose, look, as an elected member and a city councillor, you get a lot of information. You're privy to a lot of information through various channels, and I think it's important for me as an elected member who is representing the, let's say, 80,000 people in Galway, that any information that I have that I feel might be useful to someone in my area, I try to channel it out, be it a COVID-19 update, or be it an update on a new grant or a wage subsidy scheme or whatever. I think it's important to channel out that information, and I suppose I have the facility. I have quite a good base and a platform on Twitter and, let's say, Facebook to use that. So I think it's important to use that. I suppose one thing I sort of agreed with myself was, when I signed up to run, was that I'll try and be as open and as transparent, like as open and as accessible as possible to everyone. And like, I have a phone number, I have WhatsApp, I have an email, I have Twitter, direct message, Facebook. I'm very accessible to anyone, and whether I agree with someone or disagree with them, I'll try at least to respond to them, to give my point of view and try and reason with them in terms of where it's coming from. There's nothing worse than someone emailing you and you say in 6 months' time, he didn't even bother getting back to me. And while I said I mightn't agree with them, I'll give them my point of view. And I think that's important, because ultimately we're all human beings and we need to be treated like adults. And that's what I've done. I've said I'd be as accessible as I can. And there's a lot of people, for instance, will try and get access to a minister, try and get access to various government departments. And it's a really good medium, a good way of channeling information is to contact me to make that representation on your behalf, because often those links, those connections aren't there for a person that's not involved. So I'm absolutely more than happy. And going back to your social media, I think it's new politics, and it's something that I most certainly think is something I like doing. I like getting information out there, sharing information, giving my views on things, because I think people ultimately are interested in that. And until which point, as they tell me I'm not, I'll keep doing it, and it's good to get positive feedback like that from yourself on it.
Yeah, and because I remember, I'm conscious that I am very, it's a huge stereotype, but it seemed with some politicians that, like, I remember even going back older, the only time you would see them is towards the end of a political campaign where they wanted your vote, and you mightn't see them again for the next X amount of years, whatever the term. But to be, I think people, we do live in an information age now, and at times it felt like there was, as you touched on it there, like some people might feel a level of importance, say, in a weird way, having this information and being able to, oh, I know everything sort of it. But it's refreshing to hear that you want to share that information, whatever your political allegiance is. To information is power. I think we all need to be. It's again, without getting too deep into what education can lift a lot of people, can grow a lot of personal life situations as well. So there is huge power in getting information out there, whether it's some of it's good, some of it's bad, but it needs to get out there.
It's important, and keeping a consistency of the communicating that information. And whether, like, for instance, yesterday on my Facebook, I shared the disappointing message to a lot of people that, let's say, publicans, that pubs weren't opening. So it's not all just your grant applications, your various good news stories. I try to be as independent and as objective as possible with what I put out, and be as consistent. And I think people appreciate that, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know from a personal point of view, I suppose I better put out for the record, I have no political allegiance whatsoever. I didn't grow up like you in a family that would have been kind of aligned or whatever. So it's just me as a general kind of viewer and consumer of information. I do find it refreshing to have that information there, and as you said, good and bad. I suppose, just curious, like, so you've always had the interest of politics. The opportunity came, you jumped at it. Was there ever a moment you're like, oh, what the hell am I doing here? Or was it always kind of positive from there? Or is there days where you might get a crappy mail or a crappy message or something like that, and you're like, what am I even doing here?
I suppose, like I said, it was always sort of suggested that potentially I would step in and run for election at the right time, I suppose, when it suited let's say, the candidate that was sitting in the seat, or the councillor that was sitting in the seat that they'd vacated. I suppose it did happen all very, very quick. When I got the call, I was in Dublin at the time. I was doing an audit, I think, and I remember getting on a train, and I got off at Butler's and took the call, and I was fairly surprised. And this was being released on the Friday, I think, and I sort of initially just had to process it, and I went back to we were staying for, I think it was a 2-week audit. I went back to the hotel room that evening. I said, geez, what have I signed? What have I agreed to here? I remember ringing home and they said, just look, leave it now for the next few days and let it process. And
so did you actually, sorry to put in, did you agree on the spot with the first conversation, or was it almost like you didn't have a choice in the matter?
Well, I had sort of agreed,
Okay.
and it was sort of said that it had to go through a formality, a process.
Okay.
Firstly,
Okay, right.
the particular politician had to announce officially that he was stepping aside, and then there was a formal process within the party. But I remember, like, that was on the Wednesday. I think I got that call. I drove home on Friday evening, and I was getting my election photo was taken on the Friday evening.
Okay, wow.
And I remember I was saying that's a they say a week is a long time in politics. It's a good time in my career. There, that couple of 48 hours, you know. I remember breakfast then the next morning in the Galway Bay, and I was all of a sudden was really a candidate then from going up to Dublin on the Monday as an auditor to becoming an election candidate then a few days later. It's just it was a quick turnaround, but a decision that again I'm so happy I made, and ultimately I'm delighted to have been given the opportunity.
Yeah, and like again, I'm conscious as well that, you know, social media, you only get to see the best sides of people, and it isn't often a true indication of someone's life. But even from chatting to here now, you do appear very happy in the role. You seem to thrive into it, and I'm right in saying that, am I? I'm not jumping to conclusions.
No, I like that. Obviously had given the opportunity, and it's parts of it that would frustrate you as well with regard to trying not being able to do more in terms of the role, and your hands can be tied at times. You can't. Ultimately, you make a decision or a vote in the chamber. There's going to be someone that's that is happy with it. Some people that are not going to be happy with it, and a lot of people vent their frustration. And for instance, we had a vote recently on a cycle lane in Salthill, and I must have got 30-40 emails on it, and there was just a different point of view that I took compared to some of the views of others, and that was the decision that I made at the time. And but there is big decisions to be made in the council, and ultimately you have to have conviction. And just going back to that cycle lane, I absolutely think that there's potential for one in Salthill, and I think it can be done. But I think it's important to have the right planning and have all stakeholders involved. And I'm firmly happy with the decision that I made, and also very hopeful that we can sit down in the near future. But there's a lot of various different decisions, various different votes, and again, I try to go with what I believe in, and what I as John Hume famously said, politics isn't all about votes. It's not all about winning elections. It's sometimes about working collectively together for the greater good. And I try what I feel is the right thing to do is what I generally will go with, you know, which is what I can take solace from. If, let's say, it's not a popular decision or it's a popular decision, if I feel and my rationale, in my opinion, is right, I'm happy with that. And that's the way I try to approach various different decisions. And my sort of philosophy to it is that I have a certain belief, and I'm absolutely open to listening to other people's opinions and teasing it out. And going back to the access, I'm very accessible to anyone that might agree with me, disagree with me, but I'm always willing to pick up the phone, answer an email, and discuss it and debate it. And there's oftentimes that you debate and you say, I wouldn't have thought of that, and it might actually change my opinion on something, or alter my opinion on something. And that's important.
Good to talk, as I say, isn't it?
Engagement over and back, regardless of political views, I think is very, very important, and definitely something that is worthwhile.
Yeah, no, it is. I think we're at a strange time. We're almost at a rebuilding stages in both our lives and in terms of infrastructure. And like, I'm a little bit out of loop from back home now, but like from here, when I look around in Dublin City, it's completely revitalized. Now there's like, can I go for a cycle or run down the coast most evenings? And now I have the luxury of cycle lanes that pretty much, and through Blackrock Village into Dunleary, there's beautiful cycle lanes now. So I can now go for a cycle without fear of my life getting absolutely squished by a car. And I remember the first, I wasn't actually aware, because it almost happened overnight. And it was probably my own ignorance. I just hadn't kept up to date in it, but it was there and it was available to me, and there was wow. And then we've seen so many of the kind of streets, because there's less and less cars coming in with lockdown and the restrictions in place. And now we're, I suppose, cafes and stuff like that have got permission. And now that you see, it's refreshing to see from someone taking a stroll into town. Now you've kind of desks and tables outside. You can go for coffee in peace. I think the city has opened up for a lot of kind of more people, and that's just happened out of default. I'm not sure, maybe there was plans at some stage. It's gone kind of refreshing and European, but it is so refreshing to see that.
It's refreshing to see in Galway as well. I suppose it's all temporary, but we've in the mobility team in Galway City Council, with the approval of the elected members, has pedestrianised large parts of Galway City. So you can see now, I think at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, the Latin Quarter is all closed off to traffic. So it's become a pedestrian area. Now we're hoping to roll out parklets, which are common areas for people to sit, to chill, have a coffee, have a chat, while adhering to your social distancing. So again, it's changing the landscape of Galway City. And years ago, well, I was younger at the time, but I often heard that people said it was almost unthought of that Shop Street wouldn't have cars on it. But like you couldn't think of it any other way now. And there was a lot of, I suppose, resistance from businesses at the time that they said the footfall just won't be there. But you see Shop Street now, that's transformed that area. And I'd love to see, while it's temporary measures for COVID-19, I'd love to see large areas of Galway just open up to the people, and that being the Cross Street, the Market Street, various different areas. And we have, I'm chairing the transport SPC, and a large part of our thinking is the Galway transport strategy. And one key fundamental of that is the outer city bypass. That's 750 million of funds ring-fenced for the bypass, but 250 million is ring-fenced for more sustainable modes of transport, be it pedestrian lanes, cycle lanes in the city centre. So the philosophy and the thinking is long-term, is to try and get cars out of the city centre, open it up to the people. And I think Galway City would be a better place for it. While change is often difficult for people to process and to accept, long term it can often reap the rewards of it. And I'm looking forward to seeing if we can push that on a more permanent basis, because we can see Quay Street, you can see Shop Street and other areas, how lovely it is to walk down there in the cobblestones in Galway, and it'd be really, really nice to see the likes of the Latin Quarter. And I think businesses in those particular areas will benefit from seating areas and different things. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll probably need a canopy as well, because Galway, it rains a lot.
It does indeed, but
buy-in, we'll work on it.
One step at a time. But it's so refreshing. And again, I'm just going from my experience here. And I was actually taken back a little at times. Some businesses were kind of a bit resented to it and stuff like that. But the rewards to them have been through the scale, and everybody has such a more positive experience. And you've got to get people comfortable in and stroll around and get people out there in a safe distance. And it always kind of confuses me a little when I see that, because this is no reflection of you whatsoever at all. I'm just talking generally. I hadn't walked down Shop Street between one thing and another in absolutely ages, and I walked down it again last Saturday morning, like about maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. And I couldn't get over it. It was tarmac. It was over the cobbles. Those beautiful cobbles are tarmac it over. What the hell is going on here? And I'm stepping in and out of cars coming. I was like, what the hell is going on? There's so much improvements that could be made if you encourage people to get out there. Yes, the bypass is a huge priority, but you've got to get people into the city centre to spend their money, to get into businesses and stuff like that, and make it accessible for people. And we do. Some people might turn the nose over, but we do have to become that more, I think, European way in as well. And again, these are only my personal views, but it would be so much a better experience for everybody. Everybody talks about taking a stroll down Shop Street, Quay Street, listening to some music or having a coffee or whatever. So I think there's huge benefits into it in the future. Would I be interested, without getting too much into it, would that be something of your kind of vision for Galway for the future? It's something you would like to see?
Definitely, and I suppose giving the streets back to the people, and
Absolutely.
like I said, with the bypass, part of that is more sustainable modes of transport in the city centre, and that would be footpaths, widening footpaths, more pedestrian areas, more cycle lanes. So again, it's a really, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I just hope that people stick with it and embrace the change, because I think we'll have a better city centre for it, and Galway definitely can. I think, as I said, I hope people do embrace it, and like I said, people sometimes are adverse to change, but if they stick with it, I firmly believe that Galway will be better for it.
No, absolutely, and again, from my point of view, the personal experience, and to get people in there would be, it would be such a more positive place. The benefits, I think, are completely tangible there. Going back to you then as well, Eddie, before we let Joe go, I know you're quite busy. Where's your, what's next? You obviously have your term at the councillor, is obviously it's dependent on people. I suppose the people ultimately decide how far you go, but from your own aspirations, is the Dáil, is taking the next further in your career in politics something that would interest you?
I suppose at the moment, I tried to fulfil the mandate that I was given last May, and that's my biggest priority, is to repay the faith the people of Galway have shown in me. Obviously, my next milestone from a politics point of view will be the local elections in 2024. That'll give me a good gauge of the progress that I've made or haven't made, and going back to it, everyone has a vote, and the people will decide, and democracy is the great thing. So I'm looking forward to, I suppose, working hard, working diligently with the locals, and on some of the broader issues, like I said, as chair of the Transport SPC, to try and work and deliver some tangible good change for the people of Galway. Like I said, some things might be popular, but I think time sometimes will be the biggest judge. But look, I'd be probably looking no further than the next local elections in 2024. But definitely anyone that steps into the political world, their ambition would be probably to go further, and the Dáil would be the obvious next step. And absolutely, at some point in the future, I'd love the opportunity to have a tilt at going to Dáil Éireann and representing a broader base of Galway people. But ultimately, my focus is on the next 3.5 years and fulfilling the mandate that I was given last year. And if I do that to the best of my ability and go to the people in 3 years' time, I'll go on the belief that I have done everything that I can do, and then it's up to the people to decide ultimately. But yes, from a political point of view, my ambition most likely would be to transition and progress to the next level, which would be, I would see, would be Leinster House, would be Dáil Éireann. But like that, it's as I said, a week is a long time in politics.
Very true, but you're enjoying it. I can see that. It's not as if you've taken this and gone, oh no, that's for me. I'm gonna give it up.
If I wasn't involved in politics from being an elected member, I'd still be involved in terms of being actively involved in terms of liaising with officials, canvassing, and following it on Twitter, be it primetime, various different channels. So it's just now that I'm an elected member, I'm actually working on behalf of people, and I've been given a mandate. But regardless of whether I be elected or not, I'd still be
you still have the love for it there.
I'd still be following it all the time, so very little has changed. But what has changed is I've a big responsibility, and not just a responsibility, but an opportunity to deliver good change for the people of Galway and the greater good of its citizens. And I'm more than happy and willing and hopefully able to play a big part in that.
Perfect. How are you managing all this kind of trick we could get my head around? You've obviously been used to kind of managing time a lot with the Galway and your football career, and of course you did all your accounting exams that way through. I remember even chatting to Tony O'Gregan on there for I think it was last week, and he was describing that challenge of work, study, intercounty scene as well. It's something he said he struggled a bit at times as well, having to prioritize stuff. But you still have a full-time job here now as well. I know the intercounty scene is gone to one side, but how are you managing that? I suppose the juggling act of combining. You can't have much free time, as I said to you last night.
I suppose I've said before that having become involved in politics in the last 1.5 years in terms of being elected as a councillor, it sort of nearly takes me back to my intercounty days, where I had very little free time. And I remember coming out of college, and I was applying for various different roles. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My mother was an accountant, so that was obviously a big decision, a big I suppose factor in me deciding to go down the accountancy route. I was very, I suppose, fortunate that Prunch's Kit in DHKN, they're probably the biggest accountancy firm here in Galway, with 60-70 staff. They gave me an opportunity to do the training. Tony Regan, in fact, trained with them as well.
Oh, very good.
For me. But I got a great opportunity. But at the time, it wouldn't have been possible to probably train in Dublin, or in terms of a training contract in Dublin. Galway was where it was at if you wanted to be, for me to play intercounty and to continue my commitment on the field. And going back to the politics, I suppose myself and Pontius Kit,
of course, he's a
for 3.5 years with DHK in audit, then progressed to corporate finance with Mark Gibbs. But I sat outside Pontius's office for a number of years, and the two things that were always discussed was generally was football on a Monday morning, but also politics, because obviously the kids are immersed in politics and the history, and obviously being Fine Gael. But we always had great conversations on politics. But just going back to, I progressed, I suppose, through my training contract, and the objective and ultimate goal was always to transition into the family practice, being Hoare Chartered Accountants. My mother was working there for 30 years. She had her practice built up. So it was either her objective would have been for me to come in. And as it happened, I decided that in February 2019. And it coincided with my pushing my move into politics as well. So in a way, it sort of worked very well, because it gave me that opportunity that I suppose in terms of working for yourself, in terms of working for the family,
a bit more flexibility.
A bit more flexibility, being able to pick up a call, being able to take, let's say, a Zoom call like this, being able to churn out your press releases to the media, being able to come and go to meetings. It just gives me that more flexibility. But like that, it's very, very rewarding working here in the practice. We're building it up, and really, as I said, rewarding. It's great just to see the work that my mother would have put into the practice, that's just not going to waste, that we're building it and progressing it hopefully to the next level. And for me, transitioning in, it's really been refreshing for both her and for me and the practice as a whole. And like that, you're learning every day. And what I learned in DHK have really stood to me coming into the firm here. And to be fair to DHK, I owe them a lot in terms of the opportunity that they gave me, because potentially maybe coming out of NUIG, having prioritised Sigerson maybe over your BCom at time, some firms might take a more sterner view, but no, DHK gave me the opportunity. They saw, I suppose, the personal qualities, the personal traits in me, and I hope and I think I have rewarded them in terms of the work that I give back to them. And like I said, it works both ways. But just in terms of time, it is difficult. As I said, it's like going back into the intercounty cauldron. Time is of an essence. Obviously, as I said, engaged as well recently. So planning a wedding.
Another ball to juggle there.
That's going to be time consuming as well. But again, it's another chapter and something I'm looking forward to as well.
Now, just there before I let you go, you seem to have taken a lot from your whole family circle in terms of your political allegiance, and your same trait as your mother as well. Obviously, a tight knit community as well, I guess, at home. Your whole family spirit.
Yeah, the accountancy, really the reason I took an interest was my mother being a chartered accountant herself, and obviously, like I said, the firm was there, and if a family member wasn't going to win, you were probably going to sell it, and if you sold it, then maybe it may just peter out. But absolutely a great opportunity for me, and I'm proud to be able to progress it on and continue on what's been there for 30 years and it's been built up. And like I said, a very big influence. And even go back to influences as well, my own grandfather, his brother would have played with Mayo and won an All-Ireland in 36. And
one of the rare few people.
Yeah, not too many have won them. And he again played with Mayo. So again, football and politics very much front and centre of my family background. And like I said, from my father's point of view, he was always very, very into sport, GAA and politics. So I think family is so important, and it's the old-fashioned Irish ethos and philosophy, but your family roots and being proud of them, and they really instill in you a lot of the traits that you bring forward. And it's going back to the GAA, and really the GAA is like a bigger family with a lot more members.
Very true, yeah.
That's ultimately what it is. And like be it, I mentioned St. Michael's obviously is my club. You have your likes your Salthill James's. We're all trying to do the same thing and for the common good. And it's like I said, St. Michael's is a really like a wider family. Galway football is a bigger family, and it's that's what it is. And like I said, to the GAA, to the communities, to the guys that I mentioned, the John Wans, the Pat Regans, the Peter Kearns, the John Kennys, these guys the Liam Salmons on the Galway scale, I owe so much to them, because while obviously your mother and your father are going to be a big influence on your family in general, but those guys who just put time, energy and effort into progressing the game, progressing other people's, not just their own family members, but other members of other families and the community as a whole. It's what it's about, and that's what the GAA is about. And that's why I suppose I owe so much to the GAA, because, as I said, I progressed to St Mary's College because of GAA, NUIG. GAA was a big part. And then again, with the election last May, it was when I went canvassing, it was my friends within the GAA and locals within my parish that came out to support me and canvass with me. So again, it's a full transition right the way through.
Absolutely, and of course you're back coaching now as well. You're giving back a bit now as well. It's not just take, which is great to see, because it's not as if you don't have enough things to be doing.
Yeah, no, I could see the influence that other coaches had on me as a young guy, and let's say, as I said, going back to the Liam Salmons and what he had done, and I saw what their influence had on me, and the least I can do is give an hour or 2 hours a week to the young guys in our club. And I know they have seen me, let's say, play maybe not at heights of some of the Galway players, but they would have seen me in the maroon jersey and the blue and white of St Michael's, and they'd look up to guys like us, like me, and least I can do is just give that little bit back. And when I am handing my blue jersey over in a few years, I'd hope to hand it over with someone with some of the qualities.
You might hold on to it for a bit longer yet, maybe, will you? We'll see how things go. Yeah, no, and no doubt when you are going for because I'll preempt it here, when you are going for the big election, you'll be rounding up every GAA contact you have around to try and suck up all those vital votes.
Using your followers on Twitter to get an odd retweet.
Very good. Listen, Eddie, it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like we could take this up again and have another chat to see how things are evolving, because obviously we didn't get into it today, but politics has changed a lot in Ireland in the last couple of months alone. It almost feels like if there's been another election in the morning, it would be a different result to what we saw just recently as well. There's so much happening. It really is a dynamic time. So we might touch base again on that.
Next time I'll go a casual with no tie.
Ever the pro. Like he talks like a pro, dresses like a pro, puts us all to shame. Listen, Eddie, if anybody, I know you're very proactive, if anyone wants to touch base with you with a query or anything like that, what's the best place to get hold of you?
The best place you can get me, probably they can get me on Twitter or by email. You have my email there. It's probably the best way to connect is probably through the email is probably the best, or else direct message on Twitter. So any queries or questions, I'm here to help and here to answer.
Perfect, and go easy on the hate mail.
No,
I'm joking. Listen, Eddie, thank you so much for your time. I repeat, you've been so busy. It was a pleasure to hear a bit more about you, and no doubt we'll be hearing a lot more about you in years to come as well. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Good luck with the series. Okay, Jonathan, talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.